Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of Silph Time, your Pokemon Go player versus player podcast. Today, we will be talking about Silph's May custom meta, the Firefly Cup, Shiny. I'm here as ever with our host, Thidrekr.
Goðan, daginn, herslingar. So yeah, let's jump into Firefly, where they may take our life, take our land, take us to where we cannot stand. I don't care though. I'm still free. They can't take the skies from me. I don't know how many Firefly jokes we're going to make in, because I mean, it's, oh my goodness, it's been what, 20 years now since Firefly, and we're still pining over it.
Breaking our heart.
I mean, I'm going to have to throw some jokes in there because they're too good. Like that show.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the Firefly Cup before we jump into kind of a breakdown of the cup data, which you've been so gracious to keep track of.
Yeah. So it's kind of a more classical type-based cup. So we've got our allowed types of normal, bug, electric, poison, ice. And then we've got a, meager enough ban list, but most especially looking at the megas as usual, the ground types, Walrein, Escav. You've got your lovely Dragony boy in name escaping brain. Dragalge. And then the latest and greatest Slazzle.
Yep.
And because obviously it's unobtainable, at least for me it is. And Pikachu, which is also hard to get. So really, you're just looking at the Walrein, Escav, and Dragalge because they'd, fairly well mop up amongst themselves.
Anytime, because ground basically beats, it definitely beats the electrics, the poisons, and the ices. So if you had any of Walrein with its bulk, its Icicle Spear, and its Earthquake, Escavalier with Drill Run, and Dragalge just resisting everything on the board, they would break the metal. I think Salazzle would be super duper strong because our only fire type is Litleo and Pyroar. So adding another one would beats the fighters because it's not normal like Pyroar. So I think it would warp the meta. And since my last 6 12K eggs were Larvatars, I'm glad. I've hatched one Salandit out of, what am I at? 24 12Ks now, and it was a male. So... So sad. And then just before we jump into it, Jupiter is supposed to drop an Araquanid. They're supposed to drop like today, with the Festival of Water.
I can only imagine they'll be banned.
Yeah, I'm guessing they'll be banned because they look super strong.
At least for this meta.
Yeah, if it's something to pay attention to. Yeah, it starts in 2 days. So if you're doing a late cup, make sure you check whether it's been banned or not. I suppose it will be, but we don't know, so it's worth noting. So we talked about this, obviously. Normal, bug, electric, poison, ice. Interesting types. We removed the ground so that it's a much fairer field for some of these defensively weaker options, especially ice and normal. Normal's not weak to ground. But anything beats normal, so removing a lot of the options, I guess, helps. So let's talk about the early data then. What are we seeing from the practice tournaments and the early tournaments?
So mostly looking at the Flash Cups for everyone. They obviously do a whole host of practice cups early in the meta. And early on, I mean, even just looking at the meta, it was obvious that things like Vigoroth, Toxicroak, Alolan Graveler were going to be just solid picks. I don't think I'd anticipated another month of Wormadam Trash.
Yeah.
Right up there. But I guess it just fits. Very defensive typing. And I guess every meta that has the option of bringing Frostlass, it's always going to be something people want to bring. It's just such a dominating mon. And then like with anything with Powder Snow, a few Powder Snows snuck in can make a massive difference. So it was obvious enough where the meta was going to begin, maybe. And the practice cups fairly well agreed with that. And now with the few ranked cups that have been out, I mean, we're already a third of the way into the month.
Yeah. Depending on when this drops, probably halfway through the month. But
yeah,
when we're recording this, we're not quite a third of the way through the month yet.
Yeah, but there's a good chunk of ranked cups out there. And as always, practice cups, people want to play a little bit wilder, or at least test Pokemon out. So the numbers can be a bit wider. With the ranked cups, there is a little bit of a narrowing as people, need to take it more seriously or grind for the win. And it's really unfortunate that it's become basically like 25% of teams have Vigoroth and or Toxicroak. Like mostly you're seeing actually, a 20 or 25% breakdown of double counter user. And then you've got, a fair whack of Wormadam trash in there as well. Not quite 20% of teams, equally than Frostlass. And then it starts to taper off down into the more reasonable 10%. Like out of the total Pokemon that I've canvassed, so looking at all of the ranked cups, it is 3,727 Pokemon picked out of all the ranked cups I've looked at. So out of those 3,700, you're looking at 436 Vigoroth. So you're looking at a 10% breakdown, over 10% of just Vigoroth. So when 1 in 10 Pokemon picked in an entire cup is Vigoroth, it's relatively narrow.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of variation. That there are a fair few options that work. So, that there's a handful of Greedents being used, or Ampharos, or Wigglytuff, and they will do jobs. I mean, all three of those you might see pop up in Open Great League. They will do their job. Ampharos is a very good electric type, has access to the Focus Blast, which nothing really wants to sleep on. Charges up fast with those Volt Switches, has a reasonable amount of bulk. But I don't know, I don't feel like it's that safe an option in this cup. And it's definitely not seeing that in the numbers. And there are obviously some fan favorites like Crustle or Raichu that will see decent usage all the time if they get options. And then things like Beedrill that are very good. And shadows are allowed. So there's a decent chunk of like Shadow Drapion or Shadow Beedrill that are floating around everywhere.
Yeah, and that's what I experienced in my practice tournaments too. Most people, especially the higher ranked players, they're running 2 counter users, which is always Vigoroth plus either Toxicroak or Heracross. I think Toxicroak is the more favored one because it's got Mud Bomb, which means it's got a restricted type, and there are very few ground moves you can find at all in the remaining available mons. It's bulky, it beats Vigoroth, it resists counter. Its only real weakness is Psychic, and there aren't many good Psychic users showing up. So Toxicroak, especially if you play carefully with him, which is usually leave him in the back, I'm finding, is very strong. Heracross wins better against the normal types because it's got close combat, which also is a lot more shield requiring than Toxicroak, which you can run either Sludge Bomb or I've also seen the Dynamic Punch or whatever its fighting move is.
Yeah, I'm tempted to run Dynamic Punch myself.
I think it's probably a better play. There's not much weak to poison, so even the stab on Sludge Bomb, if you hit it against a steel, it's going to not work. Whereas Dynamic Punch gives it, at least if you gather energy on it, something that'll hit well against the steels and the bug steels too. But yeah, so close combat is less energy, more damage if you can manage to work your Heracross very well. Plus, he's got a very cheap rock move now that's pretty spammy and hits bugs super effective or neutral against the bug steels. So I have been liking Heracross instead of Toxicroak because I'm seeing so many Wormadams. And Heracross still loses to Wormadam, but it doesn't lose as quickly, and it can definitely threaten at least with a close combat, or you can just throw rocks all day and chip it down. Rock Blast is a good enough move that Wormadam's not going to absolutely. And if you land a close combat, you can actually beat the Wormadam because Heracross is just better at dealing with confusion.
Yeah, definitely. There's just like handful of confusions to take out a Toxicroak. It's very, very high damage on him.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what confusion users. A Rangaroo, anyone wanting to run him might show up. Galarian Slowbro or Slowking for people wanting to get real spicy, though I'm not sure. I feel like Poison Jab with Psychic is probably better. But maybe in the Toxicroak meta, maybe Confusion's the better way to go. That's something to look into. But yeah, so I'm seeing double fighter almost every time, which means let's talk about, just quick summary. The meta, most teams are bringing 2 fighters, which means you have to have more than one answer for counter users. Otherwise, they're just going to ABB their way straight to victory. And there's just no good way to answer it. They're going to have a fighter answer, which is usually Wormadam, trash. So you want to have some, or Forretress is the other good option. The bug steals that are bulky, there aren't good fire types. There are 2 fire types. So, and both of them are normal, so they lose to the fighters. So you want to be able to deal with that. Then they will probably have a rock type, which is usually a lowland graveler in the narrow meta because it's just so good. Volt Switch is an amazing move and it throws rocks so quickly. Maybe after the community day, you'll see a rollout a lowland golem, but I doubt it. I mean, for spice sake, I want to, but it doesn't perform any better with rollout than it does with Volt Switch. Wild Charge Rock Blast. Like, it's not a better choice. Prepare to be ready for Frostlasses, be ready for Lantern is usually what I find I'm struggling most with because it's very bulky and grasses aren't particularly great in this cup, and grounds are non-existent. Lickitung, that's the normal type that's not a counter user that you've got to worry about. It's bulky enough that it'll beat Toxicroak if it blocks a dynamic punch correctly. But it will lose to Vigoroth, which is the flip of Lickitung. But that's kind of your other big safe swap. And then the other safe swap, if people aren't running ABB, is they love Drapion. It gets energy lead very easily, and everything it throws, whether it be Crunch or Aqua Tail, usually hits hard enough to either warrant shields or let you limp away, whichever way you're getting. So that's kind of the general mons I have been seeing. Did I overlook any, do you think?
No, I think you're right there. Luxray is one that I think is popular enough because of that snarl, fast energy buildup, and the access to wild charge. You just don't know what you're going to want to shield. Is it going to be a Psychic Fang and they're just going to dip out, costing you a shield, and still have a wild charge for late game you're going to have to hold a shield for? Or they double wild charge you. I've found Luxray, it's such a coin flip.
Kind of all the wild charge mons, it feels like. Wild charge is great and very, very high damaging, which is why rank number 1 is Shadow Magnezone. But that you have to land wild charge with it or it's completely and totally worthless. And it's so glassy if it lines up against a counter user. You're just
flat. There's nothing it just can't get there fast enough. You need the 2 wild charges really. And you can't get there with counter users.
So that's my thinking there. I'm not sure why it's rank 1. I think it's relies way too much on baiting and or getting the right lineups, because it'll beat everything that's not a counter user probably if it lands baits correctly. But if they're going to be running 2 counter users and Toxicroak's throwing mud bombs at you, you can't take anything from it. Vigoroth, like if you swap in and it's almost dead and it throws a parting body slam, you can be like, oh yeah, I'll take the body slam. But Toxicroak is just, you can't take anything from it or you're dead. So, I mean, I think this is a pretty narrow cup. which, we've had a few narrow cups in a row. This one is differently narrow because they're trying to ban. I think Walrein would run the meta. I think Escavalier would run through it all. And I think Dragalge would also do it with no ground types. It's just so bulky, so strong. So like they made good bans. Whenever I see Vigoroth, I feel like I want him banned.
I
He
think
always seems to perform slightly better than he sims, and he always sims well.
Yeah, but it's just punishing when, a counter is going to slip in somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's going to get to that last body slam and flip a match. And I think it's not that I even mind it. I like playing Vigoroth. It's just when there's just going to be Vigoroth mirror after Vigoroth mirror after Vigoroth mirror every round you play, especially when it is the safe swap. It's just that matchup that ends up being, okay, well, I won't throw the body slam. I'll just build up, wait for their body slam, try and sneak in the counter to make up the difference because they swapped in. And it's just that over. The same as Frostlass. I like playing Frostlass, but not when I know it's going to be a mirror match.
Yep.
Because you're down to the coin toss. Are they going to bait? Are they not going to bait? Or are they going to be wild and run crunch and, completely mess with your head? And yeah, I think you're right with your which Pokemon you picked. Like if you look at the top 30 Pokemon from the stats, your top 20, once you go beyond 20, actually once you go beyond number 19, which is Obstagoon, you're down at the less than 1% of picks. So you're down at 3,700 picks. There were 36 Obstagoon, and that's number 19 on the picks. So when you're, top 18 Pokemon take up the vast majority of 3,000 picks, I mean, it's pretty narrow. Now, I think Nemesis was a fair amount. It's harder to look at because obviously the top picks were restricted. You had to pick.
Yeah.
It ended up being a slightly less narrow meta outside that.
Yeah. So given it's such a narrow meta, I think one of the important things to kind of talk about here is line building. We talk about safe swapping, which we'll probably do a deep dive on in a future episode. But your safe swap, in a nutshell, is a Pokemon that even when it loses while generating something useful, either making the other Pokemon limp away without energy or forcing shields. Either way is usually considered a win when you swap into a losing matchup, because then you can either farm down, if that's how it plays out, or have shield advantage as it plays out. And one of the best safe swaps in all of Great League is Vigoroth. It's just stab body slam is great. He's bulky, counters a wonderful move, and bulldozes great coverage. So Vigoroth performs. We're not seeing him at the top level Great League as much anymore, because everyone's running Metacham, and Metacham is just crazy, destroys Vigoroth. But that's why Vigoroth is you'll still see him as you climb Great League, and why when he shows up in limited metas, he has a real chance to run away with it. He's just that good. But then when we talk about line building, one, Vigoroth is probably going to show up in the majority of your matches, but he is almost never going to show up as the lead when you're playing against good to great players, because Vigoroth performs very well as a closer with his natural bulk, and he performs very well as a safe swap because when you bring him in, he doesn't have any matchups that he just dissolves before doing any damage to. He always will put in some work against what he's facing. So it's very poor planning to lead Vigoroth, the best safe swap, if you've got him on your team, which means when you're looking to counter your opponent's line, you should consider Vigoroth will be in the back rather than in the lead, and build your line accordingly. Don't lead your Vigoroth counter, wait for him to come out, because that's usually how they're going to play it. I would say 9 times out of 10 in my practice cups, Vigoroth safe swapped in if they lost the lead. Just it's how he plays best. And so you want to make sure you have a good counter, and then you need to think if they're running an ABB. Are they running their counter with a Vigoroth and a Toxicroak in the back? Because then they expect you to bring in your fighter counter to deal with Vigoroth, and then they expect Toxicroak to be safe. That's kind of their goal in doing it, because Toxicroak is good enough that he can usually punch through if he's got a shield, and they don't have a confusion user.
Yeah.
So that's the number one line I see is ABB, double fighter in the back. Or I could say, if it's not Toxicroak, shields down with Heracross, great. Close combat will kill most things. It's a great way to go. So that's what you're likely to, the most common team lines you're going to see. So you want to plan your line accordingly to deal with, well, what do they want to lead with if they've got fighters in the back, and hope to get a little bit of energy on it and then duck out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's the thing. If you're running, all counters to Vigoroth, which is kind of the temptation, you're sticking in a Frostlass and a Lantern for the bulk, and you're popping in a Raichu to try and land those wild charges, and you just have to pick what you're trying to corner, and will it work against the likely backline. Like, if they're playing Heracross, are you going to be safe with that close combat? If they're playing Toxicroak, can you afford to tank the mud bombs? Because you don't want to waste shields on something like a mud bomb that it's going to get to another 2 of them before you take it out. So it is definitely a game of figuring out what your backline is going to be to counter the very likely reality of it being double counter in the back in this meta.
So with such a narrow meta, what is your spice pick? What do you think is going to break the meta and redefine how everyone plays Firefly?
So I think early on, I was really hopeful that I could make Ampharos be my spice pick, or possibly Skuntank with Flamethrower. But I think overall, having looked at the meta and then talking with you about this, I think Ariados is definitely the way I want to look at it. Having that double resist on counter bug and poison just means you have the kind of staying ability against a lot of the counter users. Obviously, it doesn't want to take the rock blasts. It doesn't really like the mud bombs that much. Like, they're neutral with the bug and the but you've also got ridiculous spam with poison sting, and then you've got a choice with moves. So you could be just pure spam and go lunge and cross poison. You really lose out on some of the wins. Megahorn you want in some situations, like Oranguru you were mentioning earlier, the kind of newest counter user, or newest confusion user edition. You want that Megahorn to nuke him.
Right.
It's a big game, so you want to get the shield and then get to the Megahorn. I don't think you can really safely get to the 2 Megahorns to take it out. And Galvantula is going to resist. It's going to resist the Megahorn as well, but it's not tanky enough to take it. So those are the main 2, which you will see Orangurus and Galvantula. So you want the Megahorn for them. But you can go with Cross Poison and Lunge and just be the king of spam and just throw out lunges if they're weak to bug, or throw out Cross Poisons if they're resisting the bug moves and not the poison.
Or you could run Shadow Sneak. No one expects it when they swap their Frostlass in.
It is true. I hadn't even simmed that.
It's terrible. But if you think you're going to be in a Frostlass meta, it's a viable move. But only that, because your other ghost is Gengar and Haunter, and they're not going to show up anywhere. Because there's just too many normals for them to ever succeed.
Which is a bummer. I'd love to make.
I love running Gengar, but it's not going to happen this time. All right. I do like Ariados. I think he's a very solid pick. I think he's a very flexible pick too, with a fairly safe swap. So I would definitely consider him. In my practice cups, no one's going to have this prepared, but nonetheless, my spice pick is Ledian, everyone's favorite luchador bug. I have a level 50 shiny lucky Ledian that took forever to walk because he wasn't spawning back when I got him. It's got bug bite, so it takes forever to get to your moves, just like with Forretress, but it's super bulky. Like its stats are 101 attack, 161 defense, and 134 stamina. So even in losing matchups, it can hang around long enough. And then you have Aerial Ace, which is great against the fighters, and Bug Buzz, which is great against anything that it can land Bug Buzz on if you get up high enough. So I was using him as my counter safe swap when they brought in Vigoroth, because he wins very easily because they can't throw a bulldoze, so I don't have to worry about baiting. And then they think I've gotten my counter out and my Trash Worm Adams in the back when Toxicroak comes in, and then match is over. So I've really been enjoying Ledian as a safe swap if I don't see them running Graveler or Magnezone, because it'll lose those two super hard, but for the most other matchups, it will at least get a chunk in, get some work in. And Shields Down, it also works really well because it's so bulky. You will usually outrace them to winning. If you're looking for really spicy, and you want to, and I say that, and I'm looking at the rankings, and I've gone from 137 to 190, so it's not that much spicier. Tranquil, the middle Unpheasant evolution, can run Heat Wave on it, which sims terribly, but is a fire move that they won't be expecting. So you can run Sky Attack Heat Wave, and it works just like your flying type that you want to deal with. But it's got a Heat Wave if they don't think they need to shield anything, and you can just melt through. So if you just want a little more fire coverage, Tranquil, run that XL. Clearly, I'm choosing the most expensive mons here for this cup, but no one's going to be expecting it. Heat Wave is an unlikely thing they know how to count, let alone guess for. So those are my spicy picks on this cup for where we're going.
Yeah, you better believe Wormadam is not going to want that.
No. Yeah, for sure.
But I went with the cheap Ariados. Is what, 10k dust for a
second. Ariados is a great budget spice pick. And he's actually a really good pick. Like, he's ranked 48 currently with Megahorn. Like, he is well within the much more reasonable range of success. But if you're just wanting to go wild, everyone, Ledian or Tranquil is my suggestion.
If I had a usable Ledian, I'd have built it.
Yeah. Well, when you get a beautiful shiny 1500 Ledian, you walk that thing, you get all the candies, and you blow all your dust on it, and then you find excuses to run him, which is what I'm doing now. But yeah, I think Tranquil actually could perform a lot better than the Sims are showing. I could be wildly off here, and everyone could be bringing wild chargers to try and deal with forcing shields. But I'm hoping that people are looking away from those because they're losing to the ice types if you're running Hisuian Electrode, or they're losing to the fighters if you want Magnezone. And I'm hoping the opening for flying types shows up and Tranquil can just sneak its way in.
Will be nice. So I think that does it for our Firefly quick dive.
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered everything, but obviously any and all questions, please don't hesitate to drop below. We love responding to comments and hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. And we'd love to hear if you want any coverage of the factions field specialist metas. So faction cycle is coming back, and I think we're very hyped about it.
So excited.
Yeah, I imagine there's others out there like us, and the Colony and Alchemy Cups look really interesting. We haven't had a huge amount of time to dive into them. Yeah, if you guys and girls want to hear about the breakdown we think is going to be in those two new factions field metas, and if you want to hear what we have to say about factions in general, please let us know.
Yeah, and we did a breakdown with the winner of one of the regional tournaments with Lurgan Rocket. If you're looking for more regional tournament coverage breakdowns, let us know. We were friends with Lurgan because we've long time been battling him, so we felt like it was a good place and person to talk to, and we had a great time with him. He had so much great stuff to say. But do you want more of the regional coverage, or do you think that you're getting enough from the winners like King V, just King, just one, right? So obviously he's going to do all sorts of coverage on that. So do you want us chiming in, or are you getting enough of that elsewhere?
Yeah, and what do you think of Firefly and metas like this? How do you guys feel like these metas have been performing? Do you feel like they're narrow? Do you feel like they're hitting the right spots in terms of the diversity in the ones you can pick? I feel like there's definitely options in this. You know, the fact that we can make, you know, some of the top 50, you know, top 100, top 200 work is great. It's not obviously that narrow, but how do you guys and girls feel about it? You know, let us know. We'd love to hear what you think.
Yeah. And then, of course, as always, we'd love to hear what you want to hear about. So, one, send us the mons you want us to build for Great League, right? For Whose Line. We love trying to struggle with these ridiculous mons you're giving us. It's a lot of fun. And two, what ideas in PvP, what grander ideas are you struggling with? Things like what safe swapping or things like shield building or shield management. Let us know what topics you want us to cover so that we can produce the content you all want to hear. And to make sure you're getting this content as soon as possible, do please make sure you give it a like and a subscribe for us. That helps us know which videos are working and which videos aren't working, so we can continue to cater towards you wonderful people out there listening to our material.
Yeah. And we're on YouTube and Spotify and wherever else you want to get your podcasts. And feel free to drop us an email at silphtime@gmail.com.
And that link is on the screen right now. So thank you all so much, everyone, and we will catch you all next time.
Bye.
Bye.